Now, parking can be one of the most stressful parts of a trip to the shops. You've got to find the change, downloading the app to get the ticket online, often against the clock. And private parking firms have pledged to update their rules to ensure drivers aren't penalised if they don't park within 5 minutes. It's because Rosie Hudson was taken to court last year after racking up a fine of nearly £2,000 for taking more than 5 minutes to pay.
When I went to pay through the online system, I couldn't access any signal. The only time I could get signal was once I was in the building where I worked. I got receipt, proof of payment to say, yes, you've paid for a full day's parking, 12 hours per day. They still seem to believe that because I haven't paid within that 5-minute grace period, I'm expected to pay a fine.
Well, in December, the parking company dropped its case against Rosie, but said the car park signage was clear about the 5-minute rule. And today, the firm's been back in touch with the BBC to say it still disputes Rosie's version of events and says on one occasion she took 3 hours to pay for parking. Now, the British Parking Association says it'll revise the rules around parking difficulties by next month, aiming to carry out a review of the private parking sector by April. Well, Scott Dixon, a.k.a. the complaints resolver, is a consumer and motoring disputes expert. Hiya, Scott.
Hiya, Claire. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. I mean, we've all been there, haven't we? It can take a few minutes to sort the parking out. And Rosie says, you know, in her case, walking away from the car, I've been there as well, just trying to get reception on the app to get the phone able to get into the app.
Yeah, and it is a big problem, and this has been going on for years, Claire, and the industry knows that. And this is simply a knee-jerk reaction to adverse media on Rosie Hudson's case. And within the new watered-down industry code of practice, there is a 10-minute grace and consideration period and what the BPA, the British Parking Association, say, and they say that's to allow you time to exit the car park after staying in the parking space. But that's not strictly true. That's to give you time to read the terms and conditions of the signs to decide whether you want to enter into the contract and park on private land. So I think this 5-minute rule should be abolished because there's already a 10-minute grace and consideration period in place, which should capture this.
So how do we avoid being caught out, Scott? I mean, clearly a look at the rules is needed. Where do you stand on this?
Well, with Rosie Hudson's case, she proved that she paid for every parking event. She paid for parking. She even found on Google Street View that the payment meters were broken. So not only were the cash meters broken, she was struggling to get a Wi-Fi signal, and she's not alone, but she made every effort to pay, and she paid. So there is no breach of contract. So what I would say is if you're caught up in this sort of scenario, your first stage appeal will always be rejected because that's the business model of the private parking operator, but escalate it to the second stage. And if that gets rejected, take it to the small claims court. And that's what Rosie did. But if you take it to the second stage, 42% are upheld.
Yeah.
So, and the only parking charge notice that Rosie paid was issued more than 14 days after the parking event, meaning that there was no keeper liability and she didn't have to pay it. And that's a breach of Schedule 4 of the Protection of Freedoms Act 2012, and nobody would know that. But I reviewed Rosie's court defence and pointed that out to her, and she put that to Excel Parking. And they paid the £60 that Rosie paid to a chosen cancer charity of her choice. But you have to be very cute with your wording on those appeals because you would never know about this 14-day rule on Schedule 4 of the Protection of Freedoms Act 2012. But what you need to do is say, there is no keeper liability. I'm only invited to disclose the driver. You cannot assume that I am the driver. There is no keeper liability. Your only option is to either cancel it or give me a code to escalate it at your expense.
Yeah, God, know your rights. That's your message, isn't it? Just quickly, yeah. Scott, is this one of the largest fines you've heard about? I know it was over a long time and accumulated, but almost £2,000.
Well, you regularly hear of large four-figure sums. I mean, this is probably the exception insofar as it's attracted so much media attention. But I mean, Rosie's not alone, and Rosie needs to be applauded for standing her ground and shining a spotlight on what is a scam, really. And this is why we need a proper UK government code of practice, because we cannot rely on the trade associations and industry bodies to mark their own homework and make the rules up as they go along. Motorists need a level playing field, and they haven't got that as things stand.
It's great to talk to you. Thank you very much. Scott Dixon there, a.k.a. the Complaints Resolver, talking about that story.